Welcome back to Was It That Good, the series where we take some of the best albums of all time, re-listen to them, and decide if they were actually that good.
Today we're going to be looking at Rage Against the Machine's self-titled debut album released back in 1992. Now, this album has gained a cult following across the globe. I think everybody knows at least 2 tracks off this album, and we're going to dive into it to see if it really was that good.
So should we go into the first track, which is Bombtrack? Tim, what did you think?
This starts off the album so well. That pumping in, just the bass line initially, doom, 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 straight into the drums building up, and then just crash into everybody joining in. What a way to start an album.
When I was listening to this, I tried to imagine it was my first ever time hearing Rage Against the Machine, and if this was the introduction, instantly I'd have been like, oh my God, I am in for something special here. And also straight away you get to know exactly what Zach De La Rocha is about, because obviously a lot of bands of the time have singers, whereas he's more like rap, spoken word with singing in there. But from the first track you go, yeah, this guy's special.
Yeah, you just know that he's going to be delivering some force, and that initial that comes in when every instrument joins is just, I think that encapsulates Zach De La Rocha's entire being in one little word.
And this is something I'll probably say for quite a lot of tracks throughout the album, but the little breakdown and then leading into a heavier moment with a guitar solo in there about the 3-minute mark. They do this so well on so many tracks, so I'm going to say it loads of times. But again, to start off the album, it shows the talent of Tom Morello, which we all know, but at the time, people won't have. So you go, oh shit.
Considering this is 1992, the noises that Tom Morello made with his guitar, with the equipment that he would have had back then, is anything short but just absolute genius.
And then we go into another big banger, arguably Rage Against the Machine's biggest track, I would probably say it is, in Killing in the Name.
Those initial strikes on the guitar are iconic at this point. As soon as you hear those, if you're anywhere on a night out, if you're at an alternative like club night or something, you hear those, you know everybody's about to lose their shit.
I've got something very similar to you. Those intro guitar notes, and I've just put, you know it's going down in all capitals, because you just instantly like, oh, where is this going to lead us? And it leads us into an energetic, anthemic banger.
Everything dropping out and leaving just that delicious bass line going on as well. I think the bass throughout this album is particularly standout. I mean, every instrument across this album is standout. Everybody carries their weight nicely. Vocals, guitar, bass, and drums all doing a phenomenal job. And one thing that I've noticed as well across this album is they're very simplistic melodies, but they never get boring because they keep adding little twiddles here and there and little changes, you know, slightly changing the format, but keeping it very pumping and keeping things rolling.
And obviously the track is themed around kind of police violence and I mean, really just police violence. And I think that we're missing more politically charged music that really makes it into the mainstream. I know this album didn't blow up instantly on release, but the topics that are covered throughout this and in this track, to say that this is their biggest is pretty crazy, really, because I think if a band released a track like this now, like the end of the track where they're just constantly repeating, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me, that would never get radio play now.
Not a chance.
30 seconds of that. But the anger in it and the passion in the delivery, and it actually means something. Looking back at this album and the impact it had, it just amplifies it to another level.
And to add that political message with such a phenomenal track and a chorus that just gets you bouncing, like this kind of music to see live would be absolutely insane. And I'm so sad that we didn't get them a few years ago at Reading and Leeds. It was very upsetting. But if you'd have seen this song popping off there, the chorus is so bouncy, you just know everybody would be losing their mind. And like I'm saying, to tie the political message into that, fantastic work.
And then we're on to Take the Power Back, which had another fantastic intro, more like guitar picking, which then introduces a bass line, which then brings us more energy again. I just really liked how they added a different element. Again, it was like guitar, bass, boom, we're ready to go.
Yeah, and the end of the last track where it does the big build up with the drum rolls and then just ends on dun, 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 dun. And then this track starts with the bass kick, the dun, 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 dun. I think that lends itself so well. And whilst on the surface it might not seem like a transition, when you actually listen to the way that the tracks lead into one another, it does such a good job of like ending and then starting again.
And there was one lyric in this track which I picked up on and I want to kind of single out. I think Rage Against the Machine being so correct in their time, but it also is correct in the modern day, because one of the lyrics is, because the circle of hatred continues unless we react. And I think in modern day Western societies, whether that be the United Kingdom or America, the circle of hatred is certainly still continuing. It's just on different people or even the same groups of people. But especially in America, in the UK at the minute, we're seeing stuff about trans people, stuff about gay people, stuff about immigrants all the time. This message still rings so true. And if anything, it actually made me quite sad that Rage Against the Machine were talking about this in the early 90s. And it's still the same issues that are going on. But it also proves how good the songwriting is, that it can be still so relevant in the modern day.
And just to draw context to that, this album is 33 years old now. 33, which is absolutely insane, because listening to this album, when you go through it, it still feels fresh. The political message that they're bringing, the sound that they bring, everything throughout it feels so fresh. But on this track in particular, there's a slappiness going on in the background throughout the track on the bass that I absolutely adore. And then there's a calm section at around 4 minutes 20 where everything just drops out and it's a nice dynamic, a nice peaceful bit. And then, we're building back up. We're building back up. Here we go. Blap in your face. Everything's done.
They do it so well, building the tracks up and down whilst adding in and taking out different elements, but it just remains interesting the whole time. And the ending of every track, at least in the first half of the album, I noticed they would do that, calm it down for a second, and then boom, end it with energy and leads us into the next track, which is Settle for Nothing.
Right off the bat, this is a lot more mellow track. This is something where you initially go, I've not actually heard this so far. This is a different style that we're going for here. And Zach's voice really stands out to me on this track, because that man can lend his voice to pretty much any style. It's not just necessarily aggressive sounding instruments. He can lend it to some more peaceful tones, and he can kind of deliver more of a spoken word. But then when the aggression starts to build up, he starts getting shouty and raspy, and he's got a phenomenal voice.
And there was 2 words where that aggression was really what's the word? Was really articulated when he screams suicide, and then a little bit later in the track screams genocide. And I think that the power of those words, but just to be able to deliver it as an individual, like, screamed note is impressive. But it was strange because after the suicide note, there was a section of the song, given it was so dark in lyrics and theme, where there was a more high-pitched guitar solo where everything felt happy for a minute. It kind of brought joy, and then it went straight back to that angry kind of political message.
Yeah, you can really feel the extent of like emotions that have been put into this album as a whole, but this track in particular really shows off the range that they've got and what they're feeling at the time when they're writing this album. And it's got a heavier bit, but only briefly, like you're saying. It's very slight, and then it goes back to being calm again. And throughout this track, I think the drums are particularly good because they manage to add a nice dynamic and they keep things carrying. Even whilst it is a bit more of a laid-back track, the drums are just powering through.
And then we're on to another one of the big hitters from this album, which is Bullet in the Head. I think Tom Morello's dunking on us with this. The really unique, amazing, distorted guitar work is something that, I mean, has it really been seen to this level since, if people haven't just called it a copy of Tom Morello's work here?
Yeah, I mean, Tom Morello has just got his signature sound, and you can still hear it. Like, he did a track with Bring Me the Horizon not long ago, and he had his trademark sound on there, and I think he has just really got that signature down. If you hear that sound, that is Tom Morello, and I don't really think there's anybody out there that has the balls to attempt it without just being, like you say, called a Tom Morello ripoff.
And one of the themes of this track, or at least the one that I picked up on majorly, was about the media controlling people and their ability to do so through screens, etc., which would have been TVs back then. Do you think that's got better or worse since this album released? Do you think the media has more control over the general person's narrative on life now or in 1992?
It's a difficult one because then you've got to include social media and all these other facets. And I would almost say, even though there's more freedom now, people are more inclined to follow the media because they're more aware that the media is trying to brainwash them. But in turn, they're not realizing that they're doing it via other facets now. So they think that they're being, free and thinking themselves, but really they're being fed this narrative through algorithms now rather than it being the media.
Yeah, because then he was referencing a TV screen, but now it's just little phone screens, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's just still the media, just in a different format. Anyway, I found that very interesting. But the breakdown about the halfway point in this track was absolutely unbelievable. And then it just kind of led into that repeated bullet in the head.
And you've got in that breakdown, you've got Zach's whispery vocals where it's a lot calmer and it's like, right, everybody stay down. We're going to keep quiet in this part, and then builds up, like you say, to Bullet in the Head. And we move off that into Know Your Enemy, which the drum roll at the end of the last track leads very nicely nicely into this.
This was a little bit funkier in moments, and
Back
there's
with that straight funk.
Yeah, there's a few songs in this that show that, and obviously on some later albums, Rage Against the Machine really lean into that. But I do quite appreciate the fact that not every track is just straight like screaming and anger and angst. Like, they show their musical talents and their ability to put together a funky track as well.
Yeah, and there's another great build-up in this track at around 4 minutes. And at this point in the album, you're kind of thinking these guys are the masters of this sound, because at no point does it become boring. And people could say it's formulaic and this, that, and the other. But it's not, because every time it's different. And they keep this simplistic melody line going throughout whilst having a great build-up, a great breakdown, all of the above. And you can't fault them for that, because they managed to achieve it so differently, yet it's such a style. I don't know how to like enunciate what I'm trying to get across, but I'm very impressed by it.
You just loved every second of it. Also, there was a line in this, that I've got no patience now. Who was that? Because that was not Zach De La Rocha. I don't know, but
so I think it's either the bassist, I think it might be the bassist, or the drummer lend their vocals to the track. I'm pretty sure the bassist also did backing vocals and a bit of keyboards on this album, potentially.
Just because I was going to say, it feels like the first time that it's not been Zach's vocals, or at least it's the first time that I picked up on it throughout the album. But I'm just going to keep on pointing out random lyrics, because I was really listening to him and try to get into the mindset and the kind of idea as to what Zach was thinking in this album. And at the end of this, obviously the track being called Know Your Enemy, he kind of lists off a bunch of different enemies. And the last one he says is The Elite. And then he goes on to shouting, all of which are American dreams.
All of which are American dreams.
But I think being a part of the elite and the upper rich class now is kind of the only American dream left that everyone's aiming towards and striving towards. Again, just showing how fantastic the songwriting is, given this came out in 1992.
It's great songwriting, it's so politically charged. They make a really good, they give you a great idea of what the state of the world was like at that time. At the same time, it's somewhat harrowing because it still rings true. And you'd kind of hope that by this point something would have changed, but absolutely nothing has changed.
And we go on to Wake Up, which I know you're going to pick up on that tasty bass line that starts things off.
Off the bat, it feels very Led Zeppelin inspired, this track. And they infuse that with funk, which they've done throughout this whole album. I think funk is a great word to use for Rage Against the Machine. I don't think people say it enough. They kind of band them into new metal and this kind of genre, but to me it is like funk metal more than anything, because the way that the bass is doon slapping throughout, and the crazy guitar solos, the drum work as well. I think it's a great track all round, but I do think there are other candidates off this album that should take this song's place. So this is one of the top 3 or 4 tracks off the album. I do think there are other ones that are slightly better than this.
You see, I really, really like this one. Again, the lyrical content was fantastic. Obviously, the reference Martin Luther King, the reference Malcolm X. I think if you really dive into the lyrics, it's great. But also, it's the second longest track on the album. And for the whole 6 minutes, there was no point where I was bored. Again, they take the energy up and down. There's fantastic guitar work, fantastic drum work. But there was a really interesting line which I picked up on again. I'm actually picking my phone up for this one because I don't want to mess it up. So it was a bit where Zach was kind of talking. It wasn't singing or even rapping over it. And it says, through counterintelligence, it should be possible to pinpoint potential troublemakers and neutralize them. So that line is from an FBI memo from March 1968, which was a month before Martin Luther King was killed. So he says that line, I'm just going to say it again because it's quite a tongue twister. Through counterintelligence, it should be possible to pinpoint potential troublemakers and neutralize them. And then he follows that up with screams of just wake up to end the song. But that is such a powerful line, saying that was said in an FBI memo a month before Martin Luther King was assassinated. And then him just screaming wake up, see the facts straight after. I never even knew that. I researched that. I heard that and I thought, that's got to be something. There's got to be something behind that. There's no way that I'd be included in a track if it wasn't some sort of statement from the CIA or FBI. And it was. And that is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, to pick that apart and then say, well, if that's the case, then how come the assassinations happen if they're able to stop these people in advance? That's absolutely, I didn't know that. That's a great little bit of trivia that I enjoy that. And another thing about this track, like you were saying, the length of it, They changed the time signature up a few times, and I think that really adds to the longevity of it because you never get bored because all of a sudden there's a different groove going on, there's a different funk going on, and it just keeps it interesting, keeps things fresh, and you can feel the whole band losing their shit right at the end of the track. They're all just hitting the bass really hard, strumming the guitar as hard as they can, and you feel so much energy, and then it blasts off into Fistful of Steel, which has a very, very weird intro.
Yeah, I actually think this is my least favourite track on the album. That really high-pitched guitar note kind of reminded me of like an air raid siren or something, but I didn't get down with it. I didn't like it. It kind of just turned my musical ears off. I was a bit like, ooh.
Well, I think the guitar immediately feels like something that we've not heard before on this album. So Tom Morello has really managed to pull something else out of the bag because he's been so experimental so far. We get to this point and he's still doing things that sound nothing like anything else that was out at the time. And it's straight back with the funk though, and I really like the chiller vibes of this track as a whole, but it still manages to keep that aggression going, it still manages to keep things ticking over, and I think it's a great little combination of both chill vibes and aggression.
Yeah, it was certainly choppier than a lot of the tracks we've heard so far, which, as you say, lends into that more funky vibe, but it just kind of sounded like something I'd hear in, not quite a horror film, but I don't know, it sounded more like a movie soundtrack to me. I didn't vibe with this one as much, but we'll move on to Township Rebellion.
That bouncy bass at the beginning, I don't know how they've achieved that. I don't know how they've done it, but it's such a great sound, and it's so different to anything that we'd heard before, and to be able to make these sounds into a track that's palatable and still amazing, that takes a lot of work.
I also noticed in the intro the drumming had changed a little bit. There was like cowbells going on and a bit more of a focus. Again, just trying out different sounds and making them work. And there was another amazing guitar solo just before the end of this track, which... How many times can we shout out Tom? We know he's one of the most legendary guitarists, but even from a debut album when a lot of people wouldn't have mastered their craft, he clearly has.
Yeah, even with this being a very discordal guitar solo, it still manages to sound great with the rest of the track. And I can imagine it's not for a lot of people, but for me personally, I fucking loved it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic.
Well, we are on to the last track of the album, very aptly named given the theme of the lyrics throughout, In Freedom.
A kick in the teeth for a last track is how I've written this down. I love Zach's like, wah! At the intro. There's like, he says, boo, boo, boo.
You love his what?
He's like fucking Super Mario or something. I just think it adds so much fun to the track because you can tell he's just enjoying himself in the studio.
I've mentioned so many times how this album is timeless in its lyrical content and it still relates to today in many ways, but there was one reference to a piece of technology in this track which made me realise how old it was. In the first couple of lines, he references a floppy disk. Says something like, I'm live, not like a floppy disk.
Yes, yeah.
And I was like, a floppy disk?
Yeah. Oh, brother, that's a save symbol in games now. Nobody knows what a floppy disk is actually for. I really like the cool breakdown section in this one. They're messing around with time signatures again a lot. And the dropout at around 3:40, followed by Zach whispering anger is a gift into his trademark yell and the whole band kicking in. Absolutely phenomenal work. And for a final track, it really brings that power and really solidifies, this is who we are, this is what we've come to do, and this is how we're going to be going forwards.
And I actually think the last line, which is effectively the last line on the entire album, just him screaming freedom, also portrays what they're aiming for, what they want, and kind of what they want people to strive for having listened to this album.
Yeah, and then there's the crazy crescendo ending where they're all losing their shit and then leaving the guitar to just make that distorted tone. It's almost like they've recorded this album in one take, they've got to the very end of it, and they've all just said, let's just go ape shit, and then just drop it all, and then they just leave it and walk out. And I think that's such a great picture to paint.
But Tim, that's it. We're at the end of the album, so tell me what you thought as a whole.
Raw, unfiltered energy from start to finish. There is no other album that encapsulates this kind of aggression and this kind of angst, like political angst, not teenage angst, more like, this kind of like fuck the system, which again, they are called Rage Against the Machine. So for this to be a debut album for a band that is named that, it's perfect.
In a very similar ilk to you, I think the messaging throughout this album is absolutely unreal. I don't know if there's even any albums I can think of off the top of my head that match it in terms of realism, in terms of actually talking about topics that affect pretty much every working class person, in terms of speaking about Black history in America specifically. It covers that fantastically. But not only that, every musician in the band has moments to shine throughout this. We mentioned incredible bass lines, incredible drumming sections, Tom Morello testing new unheard styles and sounds on the guitar, Zach's incredible range of vocal delivery, whether it be angry screams or more spoken word rap style. I really don't think it can be overstated how good this album is, and also the impact that it went on to have on rock music as a whole.
The rhythm section in this album, the bass and drums work so well together. Those two are like in tandem. They could be the same person. Like you would have no idea that they were different. They just managed to carry every track and keep things thumping in the background. And the production is so powerful and polished that even today it still sounds really, really good. Like these songs are all phenomenal songs. And like I was saying before, 33 years old. To say that songs that old can still remain fresh is absolutely phenomenal.
I think one thing that re-listening to this did for me, it brought on a little bit of sadness that Rage Against the Machine haven't put out any new material for 25 years. I think, especially given the current state of America and most of the Western world, this is the type of messaging that I'd quite like to see come back in music. We're seeing it a little bit like Kneecap, Irish band that are promoting kind of the right things the majority of the time. Obviously, I'm not going to back them wholeheartedly because I don't know everything they say. But I think this kind of concentration on the system, what's broken, what's gone wrong, what needs to be fixed, who's at fault from a rock band is really not there anymore. If we think about most of the big albums that have come out of rock music in the last 10, 15 years, yes, there's a few that talk about being poor and being working class, but none of them really point fingers a lot of the time. And I've really wished that Rage Against the Machine would come back, not only to tour Europe, because they failed to do that, but also put some new material together. Like I'd imagine after this long, Zach has obviously released like some solo work and been involved in other projects, but surely they've got something to say. Surely with the current state of America, they've got something to put out.
It's not just them, though. There's other artists that are in that same realm, like System of a Down, who have always been very politically charged, that just kind of fell off the map in the early 2000s. And usually, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it's to do with internal conflicts in the band. People falling out, people's egos getting too big, people saying, I'm not working with this guy anymore, I can't be arsed. And it's really sad to see that. And I would really hope that at some point in the near future, the actual state of the world would bring those bands together. We've seen a bit of activity with System of a Down recently, so that's nice, but I fully agree that Rage Against the Machine need to get their act together, get back out there and make some more statements, because they just unite the people. That's what they do. When this album was out, everybody was listening to it and everybody was pumping it. In the late 2000s, whenever it was, 2007, when they got the UK #1,
yeah,
absolutely insane, at Christmas time, and it was such a driving force. Everybody knew the song, everybody was listening to it, and I just think we need somebody out there that can deliver that message.
Well, Tim, we've waxed lyrical about the album, but what would you rate it out of 10?
I would rate this album a 9 out of 10.
I've got exactly the same, 9 out of 10. I do think there were one or two tracks towards the end where I wasn't a huge fan of them, can still appreciate the musical talent and that they weren't bad tracks, just weren't for my playlist.
Absolutely fantastic
However,
stuff.
The album was incredible.
And yeah, was it that good? Undoubtedly, yes. I think going into it, we already knew the answer.
Well, if you've enjoyed this video, please do remember to hit like and subscribe. We have a bunch of episodes in this series. Tim, tell them some. What have we done?
We've done Hybrid Theory. We've done some other ones. I can't even fucking remember.
Enema of the State.
We've done Hybrid Theory. We've done Enema of the State. We've done My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. We've done things from every genre, every realm of music. We do the worst ones as well occasionally. We do new album reviews. Just check out. We've got so many videos on here.
Thanks.